Hey guys, what's up? This is Falsebooles123 and this is day 71 of my daily quarantine vlogging challenge. So I decided to do an entertainment corner today, and pretty much I kind of just wanted to talk about procedural crime dramas. So for those that do not have a good grasp of the English language or just do not care about television, a procedural crime drama is essentially a drama show, obviously, where a policeman or another sort of investigative person uses some sort of skill to solve a crime or mystery. So this is similar to, your traditional detective murder mystery in, fiction, genre fiction in, books, but generally it involves some sort of investigative bureau. Generally, it can be a police office, but there are also other, shows that involve different, people, private eyes, and other such ones. So, just notable examples would probably be NCIS, which is a spin-off of the 80s show Jag, which is actually based off of a investigation team for the U.S. Navy. Or, for instance, Criminal Minds, which follows the Behavior Analysis Unit, which is essentially a group of criminologists who use their skills to consult on cases throughout the United States. So in both of those cases, they are procedural crime dramas, but they aren't about a, just random detective doing crime, doing crimes, solving crimes. So obviously there can be a lot of variety to this style of genre. Another thing that I really love is that I love sci-fi and fantasy series, or just shows that have magic realism in general. And so I really love shows like that. And so, if it has a show and it has, some sort of weird, peculiar element to it, I am so fucking down. And so I'm thinking, throughout all, I'm a big fan of crime dramas. Literally, I watch all of them so much. You literally put a crime drama on, I will watch it. I don't fucking care. And I was thinking, I want to really talk about some of the more unique, some of the more sort of fantastical crime dramas that I love. And so I wrote up a list, and these are just 5 dark crime dramas that are just great, and I love them. Not the best, I guess, title, but who the fuck cares, really? So these are just, these aren't the end-all be-all of, fantastical or strange, crime dramas, but they are pretty unique takes on the genre. And we're just going to get into it. First up is number 1, Awake. It came out in 2012, it went for 1 season, and I don't remember who the main character is. Awake is essentially it was a really unique concept, but it was one of those ones Unforgettable, wow, remember that show, that just didn't really hold with an audience, and so after it premiered, they didn't really keep with it. Essentially, what is it about, though? Awake pretty much follows the story of this police detective who goes through a really tragic car accident. And so he's essentially living in 2 alternate universes simultaneously. One where his son dies in the car accident, and one where his wife dies in this car accident. So essentially he's dealing with not with the grief of both his son and wife, but at the same time, in the alternate universe, they are alive. And so he essentially goes from one dream state to another, where he's essentially dealing with the impacts of both his wife and child dying in different, timelines. And so because of, this sort of weird back and forth between the two, he uses his, I guess, perspective from the events of one universe to solve crimes in the other one. And so we're in a standard, crime drama. You deal with, one murder or whatever during the episode. He actually deals with 2 crimes simultaneously. He's working 2 separate cases in these 2 timelines. And so he uses, perspective or knowledge that he gains in other parts of the world, because besides, the worlds themselves are fairly similar in the sense that, the only real difference is who died in this car crash. And so while, there are many differences between the 2 universes, lights are, stoplights are still green and everything else, right? There's nothing different between the 2 universes from, a world perspective. There's only small changes because of the events of the stories. And so he's using, he, finds out about a guy, and that guy is, super relevant in, the case he's working on in the alternate universe and stuff like that. Another really interesting element of the show was that he was dealing with sort of being a good husband and father in like trying to support his family members because his wife is grieving her son and the son is grieving his mother. And so he has to be there for them while they experience this loss. Because while the father has really delayed grief because he literally can just go to sleep and be with the person he's missing in his life, they can't. For them, the son is dead. For the wife, the son is dead forever, and for the son, his mother's dead forever. And so they're basically dealing with the fallout of grief, which grief is a really big theme throughout the series because of this, and I thought it was such an interesting point. One thing I thought was just one of my favorite episodes, and it was really early into the series, is essentially the wife finds out that her son was building a motorcycle with his friend as sort of just like this side project so that they could like go to concerts and meet women and be like a cool dude. And so she was like really surprised about this, but she finds a little bit of closure by actually finishing rebuilding this motorcycle and riding it and feeling closer to her son because of that. And since he knew about this motorcycle from, like, his wife's timeline, because of that, he was able to really, talk to his son and really be open and honest about, him going out and meeting with friends, but also allowing him to have that freedom to be his own person. And so there's a lot of character growth between all the different characters, and it just works so well because I do love when crime procedurals have a good drama aspect besides, the juicy crimes plot of, the story. Little bit of a call out, little bit of tea. One show that especially just has really underrated drama is probably the initial seasons of CSI. Literally think back, first season of CSI, probably crime wasn't even that big of a thing back then. What can you tell me about the cast? Do they have anything happening in their actual lives? Not really. Pretty much the only thing that happens that season is that one of the lab techs is dating a stripper because it's Las Vegas, and I'm just like, can we have something? Can I have more, sir? Let's all twist the shit up, actually throw in some, stuff happening for your characters. Why should I give a shit about them, solving crimes if I don't know who they are as people, So, let's move on. Next up is probably one of my favorite TV shows ever. And that is, just doing some quick looking and seeing, Pushing Up Daisies. It came out in 2007. And it only ran for 2 seasons, apparently, which really surprises me. I really felt that it, ran for longer, but I guess not. And the main character's name was Lee Pace. Well, no, that was the actor. I don't remember what the, actual guy's name, the character's name was. Also, fun fact, Lee Pace is the narrator for the binaural, I believe that's how it's pronounced, podcast Darkest Night, which is super good. And if you want a good podcast recommendation, go listen to it because it's absolutely fantastic. But what's the show about, right? Pushing Up Daisies is essentially the story of a man who discovers that he has the power of resurrection. That he can essentially pretty much take the life force from something else and, well, let me rephrase that. That he can essentially restore life to any living creature or entity. So he can, basically restore dead tissue, matter, and breathe life back into, animals, pretty much anything dead. So he can, resurrect people and animals, but he can also resurrect living plants and also, pieces of plants. So he, in this one, in a later episode, he, falls on a bunch of dead leaves and they all turn to, they freshen up. Or he will constantly resurrect, fruit and stuff like that. Another interesting part of the power, and it's kind of the drawback of it, is that if he, basically gives life force to something else must die to balance that out. So when he resurrects his dog in the beginning of the first episode, a squirrel dies. And, various other things like that happen. And so generally he discovers that if he doesn't want something else to die because he resurrected someone or something, he essentially has to touch them again under 1 minute before this effect takes place. And generally, when what will die if he makes something live is usually in response to generally the complexity of life and geographical distance. So if he resurrects a living person, another person dies. If he resurrects a piece of fruit or an animal, generally some sort of similar equivalent exchange happens. And anyway, and so pretty much what happens in the story is that he essentially gets together a group of friends. One is his childhood crush who gets murdered by a serial killer who he resurrects because he like kind of has a thing for her, oopsie daisy. But like, and the main issue with that, which I really love, because I do love, like, stories that set up a love interest that cannot be sustainable for various reasons. And the main thing is that they cannot be physically intimate, because if he touches her or she touches him, she will literally be dead for the rest of her life. And so, that's some zesty shit. Like, that is some absolute angst. He also has a best friend who's comedic relief, and we love that. And so pretty much it's kind of like, if you ever watch Psych, it's a little bit like that. It's a sort of more comedic crime drama that basically just deals with him resurrecting corpses, saying, by the way, fam, he murdered you, and then like essentially taking their life force back before anyone else can die. And so with those like 1-minute interviews with the dead, he's able to solve their murders and bring them justice. And there's so many absolutely great parts of the series. There's so many running jokes, and there's so many fun characters that really make the show so enjoyable. He also owns a pie restaurant, which is exactly my fucking aesthetic, and I love it to bits. Because I have, like, a little thing of pie, if you haven't noticed, like, it's kind of like my food kink. Not, like, legitimately, but, like, I love this stuff. I love making it. I'm just like, that's my fucking aesthetic, bitch, you know? So, moving on to something that's, and this is probably the earliest show on my list. This was in 2003. This was number 3 coming up, True Calling. And so True Calling was probably the earliest thing I've ever seen Eliza Duska in. And she plays a coroner, or a coroner's assistant rather, named True, which is hence the name. If you weren't paying attention to the cover, it says TRU in True Calling. And she has a slightly different power when it comes to dead people. So instead of being able to resurrect them like Lee Pace's character, True essentially will have these corpses come alive for a split second, grab her arm, freak the shit out of me, and be like, save me. And then boom, flashback, it's Groundhog's Day, bitch. She's gotta solve a murder. And so basically what happens is that when these cases event, usually in the case of an unnecessary death, True essentially is tasked with reliving the day over again to hopefully save the person who's died, so that she doesn't have to see that person on a slab when she walks into work in the afternoon. And it's actually a really fascinating premise, and they play around with it really well. One of my favorite episodes from the TV show was called The Longest Day Ever, in which she actually goes through 4 different iterations of the same time loop. And this is because every time she saves one person, another person dies through, like, chain events. And so she really has to prevent all these people dying so that she can not go for this fucking day again. And I love it just because it is probably like the shortest form I've ever seen for a time loop plot. And I really love time loop plots. They're one of my favorite concepts. Groundhog's Day is fucking amazing. And I think one of the great things about shows like that is because it's allowing you to see the same event from multiple perspectives. And it just works so well because by having a centralized protagonist, you can have, characterization with that, and also not be bogged down by many different characters and why you need to relate to them. So True Calling just works so well. I am going to have, a kind of minor spoiler, but in the second season, there is kind of, a fly in the ointment. Essentially, she discovered that there is another person who has the same ability as her, except they use their power essentially for evil, where she tries to use her power to prevent the person's death. The other person uses their power to cause the person's death, as they see it as being a sort of mercy killing. And so you have this sort of morality regarding, I guess, her ability, which is a really interesting conflict that is presented. And the show was it was so good. It's only 2 seasons, so, if you're looking for, a nice, just fun binge, watch the show. It's Eliza Duska. Have you ever seen anything that Eliza Duska's been in that has not been amazing? I'm just saying. So, next up, we're going to be talking about probably one of the last 2 are very popular, and I try to organize these from, I guess, most obscure to least obscure, and you can argue about it, in the comments below. It's no, that shit was, super famous. You just didn't know about it because you were, a young little bitch who doesn't know shit. But, just tell me in the comments. Because can't tell me like in this video, you know. Anyway, so next up is Fringe. It came out in 2008, which is 2020 right now. Can you believe that? That means that Fringe came out 12 years ago, which officially means that I was 10 years old when the show came out. Can you believe that? That's crazy. Anyway, it ran on for 5 seasons, and I believe the main character name was Anna Tov, or Tove, not sure how to pronounce her name, sorry Anna. But essentially, what is it about, Ryan? So for those that don't know, the name Fringe comes from the term Fringe science, which essentially refers to studies or types of sciences which are considered outside of the norm. This can be sort of the type of balderdash or crockery associated with things like, homeopathics or, dare I say, Scientology. But it can also refer to sort of fringe experimental works, such as things like the Philadelphia experiment or other similar sort of ideas. That being said, the Philadelphia experiment is considered mostly a hoax, but I'm referring more to the idea of that type of research and technology, where you're looking into things that are very advanced or avant-garde in the fields of sciences that do not yet have any sort of scientific backing. Essentially what happens is that Anna Tov discovers this man named Peter Bishop, who was a French scientist in the 80s who worked for a lot of black ops projects for the United States and many other organizations. And so she is using his wide experience and long history of basically being the world's biggest Oppenheimer and solving crimes that essentially deal with a lot of really interesting concepts. And so essentially it's very hard sci-fi, and Peter Bishop deals all of these crazy things that he had to deal with throughout the show. Fringe also gets really interesting because about sometime through it, you begin dealing with an alternate universe that also involves these characters, but their world is much less stable than ours. And so you kind of see it's a bit, the universe is essentially 5 minutes in the future, because remember, in sci-fi shows, alternate universes can have different flows of time. And so it's completely possible for an alternate universe to be scientifically or technologically advanced, even though they're set in the same contemporary, I guess, definitive moment. But anyway, pretty much Fringe just involves a lot of hard sci-fi stuff, and they just have such a great cast, and they're just amazing plot. So there's some definite, very dark and edgy, I guess, sci-fi vibes, but there's just also so many interesting concepts that work so well from a sci-fi setting. So if you like shows like Warehouse 13 or Eureka, shows that have, really fun, sci-fi settings and episodic sort of formats, Fringe is just such a well-developed show. Also, a little bit of a shout-out, one of the side characters, Astrid, is played by Jessica Nicole, who, if you're a podcast fans, might recognize her as the voice from Alice Isn't Dead, or as intern Diana from Welcome to Night Vale. I just want to shout her out because Jessica Nicole is a fantastic actress. She's a fantastic voice actress. She's also a really accomplished artist. She is generally a Renaissance woman of all kinds, and I fucking love her. And I'm just I wanted to talk about how much I love Jessica Nicole because damn is she awesome. But yeah, it ran for 5 seasons. It's great. If you're looking for some good sci-fi to binge, watch Fringe. And last, this is, I said that Pushing Up Daisies is one of my favorites, but Medium is also one of my favorites. Ready to just spoil it a little bit? That's number 5. Medium is a little similar to is a bit similar to Ghost Whisperer. I know there's a lot of comparisons. They sort of were in the same kind of public consciousness around the same time, though Medium was already established by the time that Ghost Whisperer, Patricia Love Hewitt, became a thing. And so a lot of people who watched Medium watched Ghost Whisperer. But Medium essentially follows the story of Patricia Arquette's character, Alison DeBra, who is actually based off of a real-life psychic by the same name. The show is actually inspired by the life of Alison DeBra, though some people do disagree that Alison DeBra is in fact a psychic and not simply using just deductive skills or cold reading. And so there is debate whether or not, she's actually a psychic, but that is immaterial to the show itself. Essentially, it's a fictionalized account of her life that is inspired by it. So there are some real-life advice. There is a basis in the real woman's life, But the show itself has a fictionalized family and a fictionalized setting that it takes place in. She lives in the Midwest, which I think was really interesting. Like, I believe she lives in Arizona. In the show, she lives in Arizona, but I may be wrong. And essentially, she generally has precognition, or essentially prophetic dreams, which will help her solve cases and realize additional details that help her solving cases in the DA's office. That's one thing that I think was really interesting about Medium, besides the fact that it deals with ESP and other sort of psychic abilities, was that it essentially is dealing with cases from the legal side of the criminal justice system rather than the investigatory or police side of it. Since most TV shows involving procedural crime dramas usually involve some sort of police department or other bureau investigating crime, it's really interesting to see it from the legal aspect. There were also cases, and not everything in the show had to deal necessarily with some sort of procedural, like some murder and episode investigation. There was also kidnappings and some really great episodes where Alison DeBroad deals with jury selection, which I thought was really interesting, being able to use her abilities to essentially help create a hung jury, which would actually help her clients, and how she would be able to be influential throughout that. I really love Medium for several reasons. There were so many episodes that just had really inventive cinematography and framing. There were some really interesting plot elements, and there was also some very interesting ways that Allison expressed her psychic abilities. Not every episode involved prophetic dreams. In one, she was sleepwalking. In another one, which I thought was really interesting, she essentially had a language hysteria, which she could not understand anyone speaking. However, she later discovers this is because her powers were manifesting because she needed to help someone who only spoke Cherokee. And so she discovers a woman who speaks Cherokee, and she's the only one that she can actually understand. And so the woman is actually very understanding of her situation. And so she says, "Hi, I understand this is really big difficult for you. You literally cannot understand anything that's happening." And so, she actually helps her connect with her family through this difficult time. In another one, she is channeling the instincts of a serial killer, and so she literally stalks a girl for literally the whole episode, and it's creepy as fuck. And she feels really disturbed because she kind of is being mind fucked by her powers. Or another one, she essentially experiences a different type of hysteria, where she experiences these brief moments where she's writing in code and she can't figure out why. And so she later finds out this is because she's essentially dealing with this Zodiac killer type serial killer. And she uses this permission slip she writes for her child as a way to decode his language and solve the crime, because even essentially it's this thing that psychics do where essentially they're writing things where they're basically just subconsciously writing things and that provides clues, or they're drawing something. I don't remember what the term is, but if I look it up, I'll put it there. But essentially, it just has a lot of really fascinating and unique expressions. And it's a sort of supernatural, or sort of what's the phrase? Magical realism type show that deals with, crime. And it's just fantastic. Another element I really love is that instead of, I guess, sort of the more dramatic elements of some crime shows, it really has more of a slice of life aspect for the sort of at-home units. Because most crime dramas deal with the crime on one hand, and the subplot usually involves the lives of the characters, which makes it more vibrant and interesting. It's part of the formula that makes crime procedural so interesting. And there's definitely some shows that do it so well. For instance, in Castle and Bones, both are crime procedural shows, they have the main investigators actually be a romantic interest, often usually enemies to lovers, in which they have this professional relationship, but they also have a lot of on-stage chemistry that makes you want to ship them, and so that is part of the intrigue and interest of the subplot, is their relationship. Very Mueller and Scholar and Mulder, if you will. But for Alison DeBroad, she has a family. She already has a husband, and so her entire at-home thing is that she's a housewife, and that is really her thing, is that she's dealing with her daughters and her husband and their life. And so there's just a really wholesome slice of life element that we just love. I love the show. I love it for it. It's It's inventive, it's fun, and it's wholesome, which you would not expect about a show where there's literally a serial killer that calls up, like, young co-eds and dumps them off cliffs. That's a legitimate episode. It is very explicit. So, guys, thanks for, watching this episode. I just really love talking about some of my favorite shows, and it's not something I get to talk about a lot, on my channel or just in general. I love crime procedurals, and I will talk about them occasionally on my blog, like when I covered The Sinner. I'll try to put a link down below if you guys want to check that out. But it's just most of the time, if I'm reviewing something or if I'm watching something, it's usually going to be horror because I like horror. But I also love crime procedurals, and I love, so many, the big ones, I've watched most of NCIS. I stopped watching it with, the newer seasons just because, I don't know, it's after Michael Weatherly and Coach de Pablo left, I'm that was sort of the main dynamic, and it was just gone. And then, Pauly Peretti left, a couple seasons later, and I'm just that's when I said I was out. If Pauly Peretti left, if Mark Hallman left, and if the character that plays Ducky dies. If those three left, there's no show. So I'm just bye Felicia, But I also, love other shows like CSI and Criminal Minds. I've been binge watching Criminal Minds a lot. Criminal Minds, I didn't appreciate it as a kid, but now it's kind of it's just my binge show. We all have a show that we just put on because we want something that's good, but there's a lot of it. So it's the comfort food of television. You know it's there, there's so many episodes of it, and you're just going to watch it, and you're going to enjoy it, and just kind of relax. And if you don't watch it, and if you don't pay attention to an episode, it's not the end of the world because the long seasons and the shows are really episodic. And I love shit like that. So it's I just watch Criminal Minds sometimes when I'm playing Minecraft, and it feels good, man. So guys, thanks for listening. If you have any other ideas for TV shows, or if you have any questions about the TV shows I watch, because it turns out I watch a lot of television and a lot of movies. I'm a media whore. And somebody's just have you seen this show? Either I have seen it and we'll talk exclusively about it, or I have not seen it and do not care. But I watch a lot of television, and I watch a lot of movies, and I listen to a lot of music, and I do a lot of stuff that consumes media. So if you guys want my thoughts or questions or ideas for videos, tell me down below in the comments. Just say hi. I don't really mind. I love hearing from you guys, and it makes me feel all bright and bubbly. Also, you can like this video. I know, that's fantastic. Isn't that weird? And that lets me know if I'm doing a good job because I have positive feedback. But it also lets YouTube know that I'm the goodest boy who deserves all the love and attention. And if you have friends that love TV shows, or they love one of the shows I mentioned and no one ever talks about it because it's wow, why don't people watch 2000s crime procedurals? Share this with your friend. Your friend deserves to watch this video and then fanboy or girl out with me about Eliza Duska, or Jessica Nicole, or any of these other people I just mentioned. Don't you love your friend? Why aren't you sharing this video with them? That's a dick move, I'm just saying. I'm not in your friendship, but that's a little bit of a dick move. I'm just saying. Anyway, guys, I'm going to stop kink shaming you over the lack of your sharing things with your friends, and just let you know that I want you to have a good day, right? Wash your hands, tell your loved ones you love them, do all that shit, And this is Falsebooles123, and I'm signing out.